Hey everybody, and welcome back to another book review. So this one is a book that I was given as part of a bag, like a not only a prize but like a giveaway bag at an event that I was at for Melanated Leaders, which is a group here in Indianapolis, predominantly made up of educators, but just leaders around the Indianapolis area, and obviously who are of melanated culture. And so this book is called You Are More Than Magic by Minda Hart. And I wasn't originally gonna read the book because as I was reading through the title, I was like, oh, this is meant for teens and young adults, people who are typically either coming into high school or going out of high school or coming out of college. Like, it's really geared more for folks that are not necessarily my age. But then I was like, well, maybe it's something that the kids at school can read. And I typically try to read stuff before I suggest it for kids to read, just in case, something is in it. And so I started reading it and I was like, yep, definitely should be for the girls at school. So we have a couple groups around the building that are girls groups. And so I definitely think that this is a great book for them. And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me, aside from the obvious, like, hey, this is just, good for young women, I think is more that even though the book is geared towards girls of color, Black or Latino, and I felt that it was really nice that at the back of the book there's some discussion questions, and there is a section for different people who use the book. So like if you're an educator, period, here are some discussion questions to have. Or if you're, a book club or whatever, here's some discussion questions. But they also had like, hey, what if you are a white educator who deals predominantly with Black and brown students? Same thing for like having discussion questions for that. And then also there's a section for like, hey, I'm a white person who just happened to have read this book maybe because I'm in a girl group at a predominantly Black school, I just happen to be a white girl. So there's questions as well that kind of gear towards that. So I really did like that the author kind of thought through some of that. At the same time, this is definitely a book that, even with the discussion questions, I still really don't think it's meant for white folk. And not in a bad way. It's just a lot of discussions that go on in the Black community, particularly, that I just really feel like we as older Black women need to have these discussions with younger Black women. And the book is written kind of more, she kind of frames it more as like, I'm your big sis having these conversations with you. And I do really think that that is like really good. And I think if I, was in the younger age group, knowing all the things that I've gone through as a Black woman in America, who went to a predominantly white school for the entirety of my educational career, I think that this would have been something that really impacted me, was really helpful in my journey and in the space that I was in. I think one of the big things about the author and then myself is that I just really felt like there was a connection, especially in her educational experience, moving from a place where predominantly everybody was pretty much Black and brown, and then she moved to this predominantly white town, and just how her experience was with that. I had the exact same experience. Like, I grew up, the first part of my life, we lived in the city, and all of my friends around our house, predominantly Black and brown. There were a couple white families, and then like we moved away, I still went to school in town, like right near where our original house was. And the school I went to a private school, so it was predominantly white. And then when I got old enough, I switched to public school, and it was still predominantly white. And then I decided to go to a predominantly white college because of the degree program that I wanted. And she kind of talks about those decisions and what is hard about making those decisions, but she also talks about, like each chapter has like a different theme and stuff. And one of the things I really like that she said was that it's okay if like one of your best friends or your best friend is white, because I have that experience. Like my best friend is white, my husband is white, so I do have a lot of white folks that are in my circle, especially my immediate circle. But she also talks about how important it is to have friends of color, friends that look like you, friends who understand what you're going through. And I could not agree more. As I've gotten older is where I've made a lot more friends of color. I did have friends of color in school, like elementary and high school, but it wasn't. I had a very unique educational experience, just like overall, and so it wasn't that like we were all friends because like, oh, we're the black kids in the midst of the white. It was a lot of us were friends because, at least in elementary school, because we were just a really small class. So like we didn't have a choice. Like this is it. This is your whole class. My 8th grade class had 13, I think, people in it. So like we had, and most of us had been together since kindergarten. A couple of us first grade. I was the first grade and on group. So by the time we got to 8th grade, we just knew each other really well. And not that we didn't want to be friends, it's just, we were like, we don't have a choice. Like, this is what we got. When I went to high school, and it was a completely different shift because I went from being in a class of 13 to being in a class of over 600. That's way different, And for me, it was never like, oh, let me find, all the black kids and we'll be friends. It was a lot of, I just want a friend, and she talks about sitting by yourself sometimes because no one wants to be friends with you. And then like the other really big thing that I thought was really well done, she talks about different forms of racism and prejudice statements that people make, and the toleration of that. And I think that is a really solid conversation to have. I wish I had had more gumption and more gusto when I was younger to, be like, yo, hey, don't say things like that. I have had friends, acquaintances, who, said things that are definitely more like racial stereotypes, like, oh, you're a black girl, so therefore like you must talk this way, or like, oh, you're black and athletic, so therefore you have a big butt or big lips, or whatever it is, right? Like these are all things that I heard more so like high school and beyond, not really in elementary school. There was a little bit of that talk, but I think our class was split enough. Like we had like 4 of us that were fully like black African American, and then there were a couple that were biracial. But like it was enough of a split that like people just weren't going to be saying things like that because we'd all known each other for so long and our parents all knew each other. So like if something like that had happened, like the whole parent like crew would have known, and we would have all been like in so much trouble, right? And if there was something that was said, I don't ever remember like anybody saying anything, at least when I was in elementary school. When I was in high school, that is when a lot of that conversation started. Like, oh, you've got a big butt, or you've got big juicy lips, or like, oh, at the time I had a relaxer, so like people are like, oh, so you got that like nice laid out hair and stuff like that. all of that. And then it continued on into college. And the one, like, people always say live without regrets. And again, I've moved past it in my older age, but one that I do really wish I had said, and I stood up for myself and said something sooner, was I did have I don't really call her a friend anymore. She was a person who I just happened to have had a friendly relationship with. And we no longer really have that relationship. And in that, she would come into the apartment, or come into my dorm room or whatever and be like, "Yo, what up, Blackie?" And it was just like, there were constant things like that. And some of it was that it was just plain ignorance, like just not understanding that, like, that's really wrong. And some of it was just because I didn't say anything, right? Like, I never stopped her from saying it. I never, was like, "Hey, like, let's not do that." As an adult, like, looking back, I'm like, God, I wish I had done that. But, you've got to move on. Like, it's not, at this point, it's not something that I necessarily need to dwell on. And I've made a ton of comments about it on social media over the years, or about things like that. And I don't recall if she's ever actually, like, apologized on one of those things, but I know that it has been in her radar. And I'm not going to, like, beg her for an apologies or anything like that. But in the book, it does kind of address that, and just reminding, especially young women, to stand up for yourself in those situations. And it's scary, and it's hard, and having tough conversations is very hard. But, what we're not going to do, and we're not going to continue to do, is to have people talk down to us like that, because it is a problem. And we need to stop that. We need to stop that at a young age, so that we're not getting to, like me, 25, and having a whole midlife crisis because I've been told these things for the last, 10, 15 years. And it's not because, your parents don't support you or anything like that. I love just the way that she talks about, like, your parents definitely support you. And your parents will always be there, but there are things that, like, you have to experience, and you're going to experience, and how we handle those things is very, very telling about what the next steps are in our lives. So, like I said, really a book meant more for teens, but I still got, a couple things out of it. And because I've already done a lot of self-work and gotten through a lot of things in the last couple years, I didn't take as much away from the book as I think I would have, at a younger age. That said, I think it's a great book. Really awesome kind of thoughts. I love the way that it's written, very like conversationally. Like, you can stop in the middle of chapters and have conversations because she asks questions and stuff like that. It's really great for teens. So I highly encourage, if you are a teen that's watching this, to pick up the book. If you work with teens or young adults in a group setting, perhaps having this as like a book to read. I'm very much looking forward to encouraging our girls group to read it. I've already talked to their leader about them reading it over the next semester and stuff, because it's just a good book. And I know the author is a spokesperson, so she does a lot of speaking engagements. So I'm definitely going to be digging into more of her stuff and seeing what speaking engagements and things that she's at. And then she also has some other books that are more for adults, especially adults in leadership, and especially women of color in leadership. So I'm looking forward to reading those as well. Just a really good book. I do give it a 4.5 out of 5. Again, not quite a 5, partially because I can't take as much away from it. And there were a couple times where it's hard. It was hard for me to kind of be like, how can a person who is white get something out of this? You know, like, even though she has those questions in the back, it's just so very like, as a white person, you're not really going to understand 95% of the book. So that's kind of where I drew the line a little bit, only because like I wanted her to have those questions maybe throughout the book, because there's always going to be somebody that's going to pick it up that is not in the audience, in the target audience, I should say. And there's nothing wrong with that. And she acknowledges that there's nothing wrong with that. But just, I kind of wanted that to be more interspersed. That's the teacher in me though, talking though. So there you have it. Yeah. So another book down. As always, please continue to recommend books. Like I said, I went back through and found some suggestions that I had missed over the last couple years. And again, very sorry, but they are now back in the book, so that means the to-read pile is well over 100 books at this point. So I probably won't get through all of those books this year, but I am working on it. Hopefully everyone is having a wonderful start to 2025. And I, again, enjoy hearing your thoughts about different books. I've seen some comments under the book suggestions as well about the different books I'm reading. So thank you so much for continuing conversation. As always, like, share, comment, and subscribe if you want to. And I look forward to seeing you in the next book review. Bye!